Much of what we know about Jane Austen is based on her literary work, but the Huntington recently acquired the Leigh Family Archive, a trove of nearly 400 unpublished letters. Notably, Jane Austen's mother, Cassandra, was a Leigh, and although there are no letters to or from Jane Austen in this collection, it is still of great value to Austen scholars.
Yeah, so the long and short of it is there's very little material from Jane Austen beyond her printed books that have survived her. At her request, her sister burned most of her letters at her death, which was a very common practice. I mean, this is not unique to that family. There's a dearth of materials in family archives from the 18th century and 19th century because the trend was to destroy somebody's letters when they died. And so Austen scholars in particular are quite voracious for any window into her wider life. And because so many of her books are about gender, politics, and about family relations and multi-generational family relations, her own family archive can kind of help create a framework to think with when reading her novels.
A unique feature of this collection is that it contains the work of a family archivist from the 20th century who transcribed and annotated the letters in a series of hardbound, handwritten books.
Yeah, her name was Gwen Beechcroft, and she's a descendant of the Leighs. So, she on her maternal side, and so her name changed when she got married. And so she was really interested in her family's history and also recognizing the scope of materials about her family that would be of interest to historians, but also because the Leighs were Jane Austen's mother's family, she, of course, understood that her family's papers would be of a lot of interest to Austen scholars. So she was working in the 1960s and 70s on a family history, and she's the one that did the transcriptions of the letters.
Yeah, if you could get
Love this book.
The handwriting.
It smells so 20th century.
It does, doesn't it? And this woman, I can't even imagine the hours that she took doing this.
Transcribing it, annotating it. Yep. Adding the little footnotes and explaining the context.
Must have, I don't know, taken years. Must have taken years.
Women so often become arbiters of family history and protectors of communal heritage. In the 18th century, Molly Leigh, one of the family members whose letters are part of this collection, also acted as its archivist.
Let's get to little Molly's letter, which I think is number 26. Is that right? Yeah. This is my favorite one.
Yeah. So do we have any idea how old she was at this point?
I think she was...
What does it say?
5. Yeah,
Can
she
you
was
believe
5.
that she could write like that at 5 years old?
I know.
That's amazing. To dear Papa.
So she has, and I don't know if we talked about this before, this letter, but she writes this letter to her father when she's 5 years old. But then Molly, her name is really Mary, but in the archive and in her life, she went by Molly. As an adult, she went back through the entire collection and added her own annotations to it. So she kind of is both a subject and the archivist
in a lot of ways.
At the time. And then her descendant, Gwen Beechcroft, takes what Molly did in the early 19th century, 18th and 19th century, and then turns it into a whole other layer of the archive to produce those volumes. And then that generated scholarship and continues to generate scholarship.
That's Gwen, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think so.
That one as well.
Yep.
Whereas that's Molly herself.
Molly.
So and then of course there's me, who says thank you for taking the time to do that, because then that makes my job even that much easier when I have annotations like that.
Yeah, because this is Gail.
Yeah.
She's part of the process of the process.
The chain of
we use, I'm sure, subject headings that are very much in the way that people would talk about this collection now. I mean, certainly the big picture about religion and family and politics and so on. But, when I was talking with the family and then talking with the library administration about acquiring this collection, part of the case was that this is a collection about gender politics. This is a collection about the materiality of empire and, the commodities of the British Empire that are being consumed by these kind of higher ranking, they're not aristocratic families, but they, are professional families with an income. And so what they talk about in the letters can show us actually tracings of empire and material consumption that's on the rise in this period. And that's not something that, the researchers 100 years ago that were reading this were looking at all. But we change the subject headings to reflect the scholarly conversations and the inquiries that people have today.
Which is the fantastic thing about a collection is that its life cycle can go through cycles. The researchers will be looking at from gender politics, say.
Right.
All the papers get written, and then it might sit for a little while, and then the next group of researchers will find something completely different to use it for. So that's really the best thing about archives, is that they're always living, always being used by new scholars forever.